Let's talk data management. And a year on from the major data hacks of 2022, and over a third of organisations in Australia continue to cite data security as a standout risk. That's according to Pete Murray from Veritas Technologies, who joins me now. Pete, thank you so much.
How are you?
Good, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining Ausbiz. This is a huge topic, and it's really interesting because we've had a couple of very major, hacks here in Australia, and not least of which was Optus. So, do you feel Australian organisations, have they done enough at this point in time to protect their data and that of the consumer or their clients?
No, I don't think they have. In fact, I would suggest that the average Australian organisation may be a bit complacent when it comes to its data protection posture. If you look at those recent hacks of last year, whilst there was a hack, there was also the issue of undiscovered data. They lost personal identifiable information that they didn't know they still had in their data footprint. So that was just an accident waiting to happen. And we've seen hacks happen since then. So we've seen compromises and exposures happen since then. So one would suggest that organisations are not taking the risk as seriously as they should. The ASD just published that the cyber threat landscape in Australia has gone up 23% year on year. So it's not going away anytime soon.
I guess the really critical question is, particularly when so much infrastructure is potentially vulnerable. I mean, again, Optus going down, the network going down has really shone a light on how our infrastructure, now that it's all digitally connected and we're all digitally connected, how it needs to stand up to rigour. What's it going to take to get corporations, Australian businesses, governments to take this more seriously? Is it going to be like a worst case scenario emerges and then regulations come in? Or do you think that they can start to move without one of those? And why I say that is that often regulations are created because a really bad event happens, unfortunately.
No, indeed. Well, you have seen the government take a number of steps over the years to make sure that Australians understand the exposure and to prepare for that exposure. And most recently, as of yesterday, the Australian Signals Directorate hardened its posture on multi-factor authentication, so making it harder for people to get access into the network by having more than just a password, so having some other third-party access control mechanism in place. They've recently announced their framework for the future of cybersecurity for Australia and the broader Australian organisation, and of course have published the Essential 8 for a long time, which organisations should take seriously because it has the word essential in it. There's some really good pieces of advice that you can find inside the Essential 8, whether you're a large organisation, critical infrastructure, or a small and medium enterprise.
How much of the obstacles, issues to Australia moving rapidly on this is stemming from the top in terms of possibly the board or the CEOs not really appreciating the full extent of the risks?
I think the board really needs to understand risk, and we're plagued by boards that have people on them that may or may not know and understand the language of cybersecurity. So the CISO and the CIO needs to start talking to those board members in the language that they understand, which is around risk, revenue loss, reputational damage. Those are the things that boards care about, and that will enable the board to understand why that investment needs to be made to protect their clients' data. Recently, we had a roundtable lunch where one of our financial services clients talked exactly to that, about what's the language that they use with the board to keep the investment in cyber going, and the word that they use is corporate and organisational risk.
Yes, and because potentially Australia has not been investing enough, does that mean that a disproportionate amount is going to have to be invested going forward, even if economic conditions get a little bit tougher?
I don't think I'd use the word disproportionate, but I would use the word very focused investment. So security of the old was largely focused on the front door. if we were to use the analogy of a house, you put a camera on the outside of your house, you strengthen the lock, you might put a deadbolt onto the front door to stop people getting in. You might then further invest on the windows of the house so that people can't get in through the window. But when they're in, if you've not got a decent insurance policy and you've not listed your valuable items on that insurance policy, how do you know that you're going to be able to protect those, let alone get them back should they get stolen? So I think I would be prioritising my investment if I was a board, and I would balance my perimeter security and my traditional cyber security framework with the resilience investment of recovery.